Coogs House. What a weekend for the football program between players and coaches. Up to 12 new people involved in the program. Maybe we'll, by the end of the day, have an idea of who's the most important.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making Locked On Cougs your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. This is a hot topic in the Ainsworth household this evening. Do you like stuff in your queso? Do you like just like cheese, rotel, and that's it? Do you like other stuff in your queso? Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We got more on that later and a lot on the Cougs right now. A lot of portal additions. We're going to break down each and every one of them over the course of the episode today. The new ones from the weekend, that is. Obviously, we had episodes last week on a handful of guys that joined last week. But first and foremost, Houston hired a defense coordinator, I guess, officially on Saturday. The news leaked on Friday as he was telling his former teammates, or his former team, I should say. Austin Armstrong of Florida have the same position in Houston as he did there. That is the defensive coordinator. Now, Austin Armstrong comes from 2 years at Florida, preceded by 2 years at Southern Miss. There was a month or so at Alabama where he was on staff for Nick Saban in there as well. He had coaching stops at University of Louisiana and Georgia and West Georgia along the way. So big name coaches he worked under on his resume, the Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans of the world. And that, for what it's worth, that 1 month at Alabama, well, only a month, Nick Saban, after coaching against Austin Armstrong when he was at Southern Miss, because, those SEC teams play a lot of like group of five teams throughout this season. They have like 4 or 5 games a year, group 5 teams, and then they also play Mississippi State, which is just bonkers. Anyway, Austin Armstrong did such a good job coaching against Nick Saban that Nick hired him on staff. He was like, hey, I got a quality control position. We got to bring you on. And he brought him on like that. And really, Armstrong left that a month into the job. I guess technically it was 5 weeks in the job because he got the defensive coordinator at Florida for Billy Napier. He's like, I just got an SEC defensive coordinator job. I got to get out of here, right? And he played Division III football a long time ago at a small school in Alabama. You probably never heard of, but he gets to Florida under Napier, who worked with him at University of Louisiana, and Napier's like, I got to have this guy. He brings him in, replaces a defense coordinator that had just gone to the pros, and kind of gave him the keys to the defense. And then that relationship kind of soured at some point during the course of the first year. Napier kind of undercut him in 2024, brought in like his good old boy kind of guy, a much older Ron Roberts as his co-defense coordinator. And Roberts had already been let go at Baylor and Auburn. Not a good look at all, but he undercuts him and brings him in. And story on the street is, if you ask message boards folks and stuff like that at Florida, it looks like that Ron Roberts was the one who was calling the plays last year when the defense was not so great. But that was kind of like the no that led to Armstrong looking elsewhere, comes to Houston for a chance to be the defensive coordinator and call plays and work for another classic, potentially depends on it as a Houston, I guess, but all-time winner and legend in Willie Fritz. And it's interesting to see how his career has bounced from legendary coach to legendary coach along the way. When you factor in the fact that he is so young. Austin Armstrong is like the wonderkind kind of guy in a lot of ways. He was born in 1993. You heard that correctly. He was born in 1993. For reference, that is 4 years after Andre Ware won the Heisman at Houston. He's a young guy, 31 years old. And again, he's got this wonderkind kind of spirit around him in coaching circles. Now, when he is coming to Houston, his things that he's known for as defensive coordinator are being aggressive. At Southern Miss, he had Southern Miss in the top 10%, top 10 nationally in blitz percentages, meaning times that they send extra rushers in all of college football. That was a key to their success there. Blitzed a lot at Florida. They're not quite as much. Had good athletes, right? Didn't need it, so they forced the rush that way. And it's interesting because when you hear him talk about his scheme, and I've only looked at some Florida tape because I was at a bunch of portal guys to break down right up throughout it over the weekend, and my own basketball tournament coaching. It looks like it's a lot of complex stuff, a lot of misdirection here, covering up coverage there, showing this, then doing that kind of things. And he openly talks about his scheme being complex for outsiders, but the way they teach it, he argues, is that it's really you focus on what you show and then you focus on what you do. And as long as players can negotiate those two things in their mind, they do pretty well. He had a couple quotes here along the way, looking at older stuff of his when he first got hired at Florida, and I'm sure he'll say similar things in his introductory press conference at Houston. Um, but one thing I thought that spoke to the complexity of his defense was that he doesn't have a toolbox; he's a tool shed, right? He's got a lot of different options. He talks about having multiple fronts and multiple coverages, and that's really, really complex when you think about it from a coaching perspective. You have a lot of people that are, base coverage teams with multiple fronts to kind of throw off the offensive line does, get a good pass rush, but you want to stay solid in the back half. You have a lot of coaches that will have multiple coverages and a solid base up front because you want to throw off what the quarterback's doing, whatever. Intentionally advocating for combining both multiple fronts and multiple coverages requires an intelligent defense, first of all. And I think that he feels like he's coming to a defense where they were pretty good last year. And frankly, what they did last year was pretty complex as well. It wasn't quite this level of complexity, but I think he understands what he's coming into. That was a good defense last year. And frankly, had the defense had offensive support, it might have been even higher than 26th nationally in terms of total defense. And he also understands he's coming into Houston, where like Houston gets Corey Platt back next year. They just had Jeremiah Wilson say he's coming back. He's not going to enter the transfer portal. You said to get 3 potential pro DBs. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff happening here on the defense side of the ball in his favor, right? And so I think he understands that like that tool shed he speaks of having is an important thing to have. Like you're going to out scheme people. You're going to have a lot of different tricks and things like that because you have veteran, smart, savvy football players. The other thing I think that speaks to his coaching style that I saw him quoted as saying is that we're going to negotiate with a hammer, meaning like offense and defense talk about who dictates what and what side of the ball dictates the other. And he's showing up with a hammer. And that speaks to the blitzing he does, even on non-blitzing downs. I felt like in looking at the couple games I got to watch, I watched some good defensive film of Florida. I guess I didn't watch the times they got beat. I was trying to find the things that he did well. But it looked like to me that even on the non-blitzing downs, they were constantly twisting or stunting. And they just say that defensive linemen are misdirecting and setting picks for one another kind of plays to kind of free guys up. It's just overly aggressive, right? And frankly, while that is a big gamble every time you do that, I think it speaks to like the confidence the young guy has, right? I mean, this guy's younger than I am. He's and got an impressive resume for that. But I think it also speaks to the kind of trust he has in his kids on the field. You don't run an aggressive defense if you're worried about a kid getting beat, right? You don't send a mass blitz if you're worried about a kid getting beat on 1-1 fade ball. You trust your corner, right? And so I think that that's kind of speaking to what he's doing here. And for what it's worth, Willie is a defensive guy. If Willie signed off on this, I think we need to trust it. Willie's done some pretty good hiring as of late, and frankly, he brought in Sheil Wood when he was trying to find a defense coordinator before, right? And I think that the combination of Willie and Austin Armstrong, what you're going to see here, is a lot of growth. Like year one, year one under Sheil Wood was better, I think, than anyone could have imagined. I knew it was going to be good defense. Even I didn't have them being as good as they were, right? Year one under Austin Armstrong, it could be a growth experience kind of thing. But the young sponge wonderkin kind of guy, you're going to see like how does that growth go from year 1 to 2? Again, he's had a strong career. So again, D3 football player at Huntington College. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not. But he went GAGA, quality control, linebacker, DC in a span of 4 years. Kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 years. This guy moves up the charts, and then he spent a couple years at Southern Miss, a couple years at Florida, and is now at Houston. Now, I see some people are upset about the idea of a constant climber. I think we have an elder statesman at the head coaching spot, and you bring in his buddy at the offensive coordinator spot. I think you can live with one of the three being that climber guy. I also have to say that if he's going to climb and set a record-setting kind of defense at Houston to help prepare him for the next stop, I'll use me. I'll use me for that. That's fine. we can live with that. Now, bringing in a defensive coordinator would, in a normal pre-NIL, pre-transfer portal kind of world, be the biggest news of the weekend. But Houston also managed to add in a bunch of new players. I want to talk about them in a second. But before we get to all of that, I also need to tell you about our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And get ready to tackle the NFL action, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Parker Angel hosts Locked on Coogs here, and it is time for some more portal chatter as we're getting ready to talk about the Houston Cougar football program coming out of the weekend. Houston went into the weekend with, obviously, Connor Wegman, big-time quarterback commit in the transfer portal, committed Wednesday night. By the end of the day, Thursday, you had 2 offensive linemen commit. By Friday, you had a third. Over the weekend, you had 2 more. We have not talked about those 3 because we recorded Thursday night. So I want to talk some about the 3 that we added. Obviously, I'm still watching tape. There's a lot of football to watch to get other things. Oh, we also are in the middle of a pretty good basketball season. All kinds of stuff to go on. And I want to kind of quickly, in the end, wrap up like what I think about the adding all 5 guys. But Friday, they added Dalton Merryman, who is 6'9", 305 pounds. Yes, you heard that right. He's playing left tackle, not power forward. But at 6'9", 305, he is long. He is athletic. I should point out that at 305, and what I would project right now to be the starting lineup, he'd actually be the lightest offensive lineman in the starting 5, and he'd be the tallest. So a lot of athleticism and really long arms. I really think in my heart of hearts, he's immediately the starting left tackle. He should at least compete. They should all compete, but I think really he's the starter. He spent a year at Blinn, then an injury redshirt, and then a year at Tech. Comes in from Montgomery, nearby. I think probably wants to be closer to home. He's better in the pass game than anyone on this team a year ago. Really, the exception of like Patrick Paul, he's better than anyone that Houston's had in the pass pro in a long time. And he's exceptional in like using his length to his advantage. He understands the tools. He's got good first step and punch. Really impressed by him a lot. Obviously at 6'9", it's hard to get down at the run blocking kind of stuff and get your hips under you. But as a left tackle, protecting Connor Wegman's backside, an injury-prone quarterback, might have been more important, right, as you're scheduling things out here. So important left tackle there. At the right tackle spot, if he were to get the starting job, is Alvin Ibosele, who signed on Sunday, or just committed on Sunday via Instagram. He's a 2022 high school kid that's relatively young for this portal class. Went to Baylor, 6'6", 315 with crazy wingspan. I couldn't find a measurement that looked high and low for it. Crazy wingspan. He redshirted a year, and then his redshirt freshman year, he started 11 of the 12 games and was much stronger in the pass than the run. Good footwork, good athleticism, and he just looked young. Had a lot of penalties and got kind of beat at the point of attack and run game as a redshirt freshman. And then his redshirt sophomore year, he played in just 7 games, started in just 3, and it looks like new coordinators and new everything Baylor had going on just didn't jive, just didn't click. Right. I got to say, I love the idea of bringing in a young transfer like this with such high upside and potential. Again, 6'6" with long arms and 315. Those are all going up, right? And that's good news. I could see him competing with Ndukwe to start right away next year at the right tackle spot. We'll see how that goes. Again, he's young, he's athletic, he's strong. I think he is a starting tackle for this program at some point in his career. It's just about when. And really, really impressive frame and body of work so far for a young football player. Starting the Big 12 as a redshirt freshman, and the offensive line is really, really hard to do. And I think that speaks to kind of where the guy's career could go. But the guy that might be the most impressive, and I don't know which of the 5 positions he's going to play, is Mackenzie Agnello, the transfer in, just offensive lineman transfer in. I'm not going to give him a position besides that yet, from New Mexico. So he started most games at center. He also played some right tackle. I could see him being an NFL guard. For what it's worth, on like goal line, short yardage, run plays, they lined him up outside of the tackle at what I guess you'd call a tight end spot, to be kind of a point of attack down block. He's that strong. Now, he had higher Pro Football Focus grades than anyone on Houston's offensive line in every category last year except for pass, where he would have been second on the Houston offensive line last year based on Pro Football pass protection and drop back pass game, I should say. Where he would have been second on Pro Football Focus's scores for Houston. Now, that means to say that he's always doing the right thing. He lined up at center for most of his games. Again, I think he's a pro guard, 6'4", 315, probably another 10 pounds on him to get to the pros, but I really think he is. Second team all conference last year at New Mexico, and again, really, really just strong, fundamental, athletic, incredibly. I mean, like, you forget there are athletes like that find their way to Mountain West schools, right? Like, impressive athlete Agnello is. Really excited about what he brings to the team. And I don't know if he'll compete with Pancake for the center spot and one of them plays guard after, if he'll just be a straight up guard, if they'll, try him out at tackle, because his second position he started 2 games last year at tackle and right tackle. I don't know which of those spots he'll do. But I think he's going to play somewhere. I just hadn't figured out where yet. Watch it, a game and a half on him. So I'm not like whatever, but I should say watched a game and a half, and then he had like a 3-minute highlight tape posted somewhere. I want to say that was on YouTube. Might have been on X. Anyway, impressive stuff out of Mackenzie Agnello. And when you look across the board, last week, Matthew Wyckoff and Jason Brooks Jr. were both like power run guys. They're both guards, both downhill, aggressive, run blocking kind of guys. And while I think Wyckoff's pretty solid product, you're still working on developing, Jason Brooks, right? I talked to the guys at Oklahoma State, locked on Oklahoma State, about Brooks, and he feels like Jason Brooks is kind of a raw deal up there. Like, part of the reason they were better in 2023 than 2024, according to them, was because Jason Brooks played in 2023 and would have been their best offensive lineman in 2024, but got kind of crossways of the staff over some crap, and he's a Houston Cougar now. He left. Right, modern college football. Now, I have to say that, fresh start can be good for anybody, and so that's a good thing for us. I'm not saying that negatively. I'm saying, like, let's welcome Kiddo with open arms. He can play ball. And they have different skill sets. Last week's guys were run guys. This week's guys seem to be athletic, rangy, pass pro guys. You're returning Pancake Hunter and Ndukwe and have like 7 starting caliber Big 12 guys. I mean, I'm talking guys that played at Cal, Oklahoma State, Tech, and Baylor, and then an all-conference performer at New Mexico. These are guys, and then Ndukwe and Pancake started for us last year and had good years individually. If you look at their pro football stuff and trying to break down individual tape, that's 7 different starting caliber offensive linemen, right? That's really, really strong. And for what it's worth, I don't know who the full 5 starting offensive linemen will be. I've got my guesses. I want to watch more stuff before I put it out there, whatever. But as they've got up to 7 of these guys now, I think that means spring's all about competition. Best man wins. Compete. And you just kind of see where it goes. And that's such a great spot to be in relative to how things have been, right? Bluntly, a lot of your players on the offensive line last year were just dudes that backed up the year before. And while Pancake Hunter is one of your highest ranked recruits to ever come through, and it was going to be his turn eventually, and frankly, he did start a game or two the year before, right? Across the board, that didn't work out for Houston in the totality of the 5 spots. And so you've got kind of the spring football practices to, first of all, got to sign these guys officially and get them on campus. I guess we don't want to take that for granted, right? But then put them through the spring, work them out, find the best 5-man lineup wherever they go, and then also start to gel. You got to start to do all that in the spring. And so we're going to get to talking about that more as we watch more tape on these guys and break more stuff down over the course of the next couple of weeks and months until we get to spring practice, honestly. But the offensive line were not the only guys Houston brought in the portal. I want to make sure that we talk about the other guys as well. But before we get to all of that, we got a new partner to talk to you about. I'll make sure that I tell you about our buddies over at the College Football Playoff on TNT. It is that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back with a newly anticipated 12-team format. It's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 o'clock Houston time, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Now, I'm tearing on what I want to see happen there, but I digress. The Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown then at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Park Ranger hosts the Locked On Coogs here, bringing on Houston's portaling over the weekend. Big time weekend for the football program. Opened up with talking about the coaching staff changes, then talked about the linemen. And I think the linemen get a lot of the love because of what people want to see the Houston Cougars grow in and get better at. But really, you had a pretty productive weekend across the board. You had another couple of offensive signees. And for what it's worth, my 2 cents are that the first wave of portal guys, whether it's receivers, linemen, or quarterback Connor Wegman, have all been very heavy on the offense because you kind of had an offensive direction. You hired Slade Nagel earlier in the week, right? So you kind of knew where things were going. Now that Houston's got a defensive coordinator, you could see things shift to where they're more 50-50 split. Have to imagine there's some defensive signings happening commitments happening this week. As far as the offensive guys go, Harvey Broussard's a name to know, folks. Wide out coming in at 6'3", athletic, bouncy, really good deep threat, Louisiana guy, jump ball guy as well. Great ball skills always up in the air and really long strider. Really, really athletic player. I believe at 6'3", he's going to be the tallest guy in the wide receiver room if all things stay the same. I know Manjack might have had him beat out, but now that's no more. I think that's the case. Don't quote me on that until I check it, but I think that's the case. He's got long arms, so he's going to feel like the biggest. He's got great verticals, so he's going to feel like the biggest. I mean, a big, big target, big catch radius for Wegman or Zion or whoever's throwing them the ball, obviously. Other wideout that commit over the weekend was Amari Thomas. Had 2 really impressive years at UAB before coming to Houston. Good athlete, big, strong guy. Now, Amari Thomas had a lot of double teams was at UAB. Is kind of like the guy there. And so interested to see how he fits into Houston, where I'd imagine that guy for Houston next year is Boogie Johnson. But we'll see if it's Boogie Johnson or not. But I'd imagine right now it's Boogie Johnson. For what it's worth, Amari Thomas was on the NFL Live's You Got Mossed segment because he's that kind of an athlete against Tulane. I wonder if Willie Fritz and staff saw that. We're like, oh, yeah, we'll take that guy whenever he's available because I wonder if there was some connection there. It wasn't all offense, though. Houston did bring in Will James, a really strong defensive back, young guy from University of Southern Mississippi. I think he's interesting because he's got some very intangible things you can't teach. Good hips, good fluidity, and those kinds of stuff. I also think he's in big games was really clearly hyped up. His stats indicate that like that's when he comes through and really brings the tackles, like really brings good strong tackles, doesn't miss many tackles in those games. Clear growth guy. I think he's going to grow into the system and program. You can see Coach JCY, Christian Young, working with the DBs and him a lot, obviously. And I'm excited about what that looks like in a couple of years. I don't know that he's an immediate impact guy. But I think he is a guy that's going to be a star of this team at some point down the line. So I'm glad that they bring him in now to kind of get acquainted with the system. Jordan Allen, though, defense back from LSU, committed shortly after signing defensive coordinator Austin Armstrong. Jordan Allen was a DB at LSU and had mostly his safety reps while he was there. You can look at his numbers on missed tackles, tackles made, etc. Gets a lot better as a tackler as he's been there and gotten older. Played in just 4 games last year. All those recruit the boot kind of things. You see, Jordan Allen is coming home in a big kind of way for Houston, or at least it feels that way. I guess I should say. I guess he's from Lafayette, but really excited that he's coming to Houston to pair up with Austin Armstrong. You still got Halsey coming back. For what it's worth, keeping Jeremiah Wilson after he jumped in the transfer portal and is now opted to take himself out and be a Houston Cougar also feels like a portal ad, even though technically it wasn't. You got Jordan Allen, Joe McCutcheon, AJ Halsey, Jeremiah Wilson. Like the DB room just continues to be so impressive for these Houston Cougars. And frankly, if you're going to be as aggressive as anticipate new defense coordinator Austin Armstrong and those guys being up front, it might behoove them to take care of some business behind. Now, as far as guys coming through campus, you had a bunch over the weekend that could commit Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You'll also have guys visiting because based on when their final schedules were and things like that, or whatever classes they were taking, they can get off campus and still go visit. And so I imagine you see more happen in the coming days. I also imagine that by the time you listen to this, there's like 2 that have popped up that I didn't know about when I recorded this, right? Things are constantly flowing in this game, this modern college football for you. So you can find me on X at Painsworth512. I try and get something out as quickly as I see stuff. I will say also, for what it's worth, that I'd imagine having Austin Armstrong on campus once he's formally introduced, you'll pretty quickly get 2 or 3 guys that are just kind of waiting to make sure it's formalized before they commit, because they want to play for a guy that's an aggressive play calling defensive coordinator, right? So those kinds of things tend to go hand in hand. I'd imagine they will this week as well. Now, as this week goes, we've got more portal news. We're going to keep watching more Florida and Tulane film to get acquainted with our coordinators more. We got a couple of basketball games this week. We get all kinds of stuff here at Locked on Coogs. So hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know we're live. Locked on Coogs, the prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.